Just in terms of introductions, that's me there, Andrew Foster. I'm the category leader, or a category leader within Government Procurement branch. My areas of responsibility are building materials and risk financing and insurance, and stand-up of all of government contracts therewith. Just in terms of informing you as to what we intend to cover today, I'll talk a little bit about the Government Procurement Reform Program for a bit of context. And then Greg will talk in detail about Stage 1, the All of Government Risk Financing and Insurance panel. Talk a little bit about the data collection and cluster development, which is a key part of what we're doing in our progress there. And the All of Government Risk Financing and Insurance Stage 2 as well. And I suppose finish up with next steps, key milestones and activities. The Government Procurement Reform Program. Every year, New Zealand Government spends over $30 billion on goods and services, and that excludes payroll. So it's a large spend. As a portion of that spend, there's about 30 cents to every dollar spent with external goods and services providers. So the very way in which New Zealand is structured and governed, and the industries that we have here, mean that government is a big player in the market. In order to ensure government is getting best value for the taxpayer on that spend, the Government Procurement Reform Program was established in 2009. There were 4 objectives: ensuring we achieve value for money, as I mentioned before, but also building procurement capability and capacity within the public sector, and looking to improve the way public sector procurers do buy goods and services. Enhancing New Zealand business participation, so it's not just about us as buyers and procurers, but also about business, and I guess making government a customer of choice. And improving governance, oversight and accountability on the public sector spend. On the back of the success of the Government Procurement Reform Program and also some work done by Better Public Services Advisory Groups, which established functional leadership in government, MBIE was recognised as the Procurement Functional Leader in 2012. The objectives there, I guess, were to strengthen and accelerate the Government Procurement Reform Program, giving our Chief Executive, David Small, a stronger mandate to lead procurement from the centre for government. Providing clear accountability for delivery of commercial procurement results was also a key objective under procurement functional leadership. Greater collaboration, not just through all of government contracts, but also syndicated contracts, common capability contracts, to name a few. And improving oversight and support for specific government agency procurement. So helping government agencies do procurement more efficiently and effectively. It's worth noting as well that the Department of Internal Affairs is the functional lead for Information and Communication Technology, and the Ministry of Social Development is the functional lead for Property Management Services. Just a quick plug as well here, if I can, for our website. A lot of this background information that we've just covered now and additional context and background is on our website, which is www.procurement.govt.nz, so I encourage you all to visit that at your leisure. Just very quickly, I'd like to touch on all of government contracts and provide an overview for you here. We do more than just all of government contracts here within Government Procurement Branch within MB, but I thought we'll focus on this one because it's particularly pertinent to the briefing this morning. Effectively, we provide access to all of government contracts that eligible agencies can sign up to and access. You'll notice at the back schedule of the RFP, we have broken that down for you, but effectively it's the way that the sector is broken down to sort of public service, state sector and public sector. There are different degrees of expectation around mandatory participation in our contracts. The RFP is very clear on this, so I won't go into too much detail here, but effectively we have access, or these agencies, about 300 of them with just under 2,500 schools are eligible to participate in our contracts. There's a whole of government direction which will take effect on the 1st of February, which will broaden the 29 plus 4 agencies that it is mandatory for them to participate in our contracts out to about another 103 from the wider state service. So That's a change which is coming up. But as I note here, also includes schools, universities, polytechs, SOEs, and councils as well. They are able to participate in our contracts. To date, over the time that the program's been in vogue, we have put in place 14 all-of-government contracts. I won't read all of these out to you, but just to name a few, things like air travel, rental vehicles, electricity, mobile voice and data, external legal services, and so on. I think it's fair to say that we're now involved in more complex procurements than we were at the beginning of the program. An RFP is in the market for banking. It's the first time that's been tendered in 27 years, is my understanding. Consultancy, building materials, and more latterly, of course, risk financing and insurance. There's also 4 contracts returning to market and either out at the market now or next year. I guess it's the original contracts such as office consumables, motor vehicles, desktop and laptop computers, now known as IT hardware and print devices. So there's a lot of activity here within the all-of-government contracts team. Just a couple of points really of clarification. So all-of-government contracts mean you don't have to go through a separate procurement process for every single agency as a general rule. And of course it does depend on the procurement construct and solution. But generally speaking, for some of those commodity type contracts, things like office consumables that we've spoken about, standard pricing for all of government and eligible agencies are able to sign up through what we'd like to think is a relatively seamless process. It's not always the case, and then access the pricing, the hard savings as well as the soft savings. And so there's benefits there for the government agency, but also for businesses participating, and that they're not having to constantly reply to RFPs for different government agencies. What we don't generally do is provide guaranteed business or sales volumes on those commodity type contracts. I guess for those agencies that it is mandatory to participate there's a fairly strong indication, and we are very committed to growing our contracts. In fact, 97% of the state service, 95% of councils and 11% of schools have signed up to one or more government contracts that we've put in place, or all the government contracts, I should say. I guess there's a little bit of a difference here, which we'll get to later on, around the way we're structuring this procurement solution with regard to the secondary procurement process and the clusters, which Greg will touch on soon. As the procurement functional leader, government procurement branch has developed the government rules of sourcing. I think there are about 67 rules. As you'll see, we have some bullet points here on the right edge of the slide as you look at it. Use of gets, time in the market, treatment of responses. They are fairly prescriptive, but they don't account for every single permutation or event that can happen in a procurement process. So we're also guided by the 5 principles which we have here. The government rules of sourcing are available from our website. Again, I encourage you all to review those at your leisure. But planning and managing for great results, being fair to all suppliers, getting the right supplier, getting the best deal for everybody, and playing by the rules. It's our responsibility to ensure, of course, that we run a fair and transparent procurement process, and that's part of the reason why I introduced David before as the probity auditor for this particular project. We are unable to provide individual suppliers with assistance or advice in regards to this RFP, and we certainly can't advise on whether respondents should respond to this opportunity. That's completely, of course, at your discretion. And we'd advise you to read page 29 of the RFP to understand the process for communicating with us during this RFP. We are happy to answer any questions and clarifications before the 11th of November. And I would just like to sort of say here that if you have a question that you believe contains commercial or proprietary information or IP, when you ask us that question, please flag that is the case. We would then engage with David to ensure that it is indeed commercial, proprietary or IP, and then we would come back to you with our view on whether it is or not, and you would be able to make an informed decision as to whether you still want to ask that question, noting that it could end up on gets if we don't think it is commercial or proprietary or IP. So what we want to do, of course, is to encourage you to ask questions. We want to be very upfront around our process, and I hope I've explained that with some degree of clarity for you all to understand how that will work.
Look, thanks again everyone for taking the time to turn up on a lovely spring day here in Wellington. And I'll reiterate what Andy would have said earlier in the piece. As we go through the presentation, please feel free to ask questions as they become pertinent to the aspects of the discussion that we're in. But if we don't happen to touch on any points in the presentation that you do want to ask questions about, we'll certainly make opportunity available to ask those at the end of the presentation. Okay. One thing that happened when I first arrived with MB is it was an opportunity to have a look at the opportunities to government with a blank page. And we've expressed here the approach that we have advertised through a lot of our engagement with industry and agencies to date, but we didn't land on this straight away. This took some time and some insight before we had defined the way forward as far as we saw it occurring. The interim period was a period of heavy engagement with agencies, with central government and with industry to understand the nuances and the different perspectives that we were going to have to manage and encounter as we sought a solution. What was really interesting is hearing the agency perspectives and understanding the different levels of maturity across government. And at the end of the day, what we recognised is this was not so much about just finding a risk financing and insurance solution that is more collaborative for government, but it is a change management process as well. And it is about managing the perspectives of agencies who are at different levels of maturity, and it's about managing diversity as well, because there is an awful lot of diversity across government, as you'll be well aware. So we sought to find a solution that understood those issues, those aspects, and managed it as much as it is a technical exercise as it is a people exercise as well. We've implemented or designed a solution at the outset that we believe respects incremental change is probably the best way to instill long-term benefits within government, but one that recognises that different agencies are in different spaces right now. So I guess what we're saying is that there is room to acknowledge and understand and build into our solution profiles that different parts of government might be open to different solutions than other parts of government. Okay? You know, we've also made no secret of the fact that we are open-minded in terms of what the long-term potential of a all-of-government review to risk financing and insurance could be. We're also not tunnel-visioned towards any particular direction, but at this point in time, our focus is on being more collaborative across government where it makes sense, and building the maturity of risk management practice across government so that when and where we can meaningfully consider alternative risk financing, agencies are better positioned to A, understand it, and B, with help from the industry, implement it in a way that is likely to be more successful. Okay? Thanks, Bill. We designed the RFP document itself very specifically. Hopefully it's a little bit different from some of the RFPs that you've seen in terms of it is not prescriptive about what insurances we want, what solutions we want, what services we want, and the underlying minutiae specifications that can come along with that. What we've really tried to achieve within reason is at the front end of the document spell out to you what we want to achieve as an intended position over the long term. And quite simply that is about empowering government and government agencies to make better risk-based decisions. Okay? So there's an additional layer to what we are looking to engineer in our relationships with the industry, and that is to understand risk profiles better, to understand organisational strategies better and how risk management can help achieve those organisational goals, and how that feeds down through mitigations that will include insurance and other risk financing measures. And hopefully what we can achieve by taking this risk-based approach is deliver opportunities to the industry to show your full set of wares, to be able to take the capabilities of your organisation here in New Zealand and networking potentially globally as well, to bring into the equation a service model and a style that positions government and government agencies to make good decisions about not just insurance, but about in protecting and securing their objectives for the future. Thank you, Bill. We did throw something else in the RFP as well. There's a section in there called the government customer perspective. A lot of it wouldn't have been rocket science to you. You've probably heard aspects of this before, but we thought it would be helpful to regurgitate some of this. Some of it might be new, but just to give you some feedback that we've received in terms of common themes from the agencies themselves. Insurance, by its very nature, is very technical. It carries a lot of its own language and nuances. And I think it's fair to say that there is a good proportion of government agencies that still find it a very foreign language, but they know they have to buy insurance, but sometimes they don't get it. They know that they just have to get it, okay? What we're also looking to do is, by building a risk-based approach, we're wanting to have agencies see the connection between what you can provide and the risk management processes that they have internally, okay? Because right now it's fair to say that agencies are becoming more aware that they have to have risk management processes, so they see it as something else that they have to add to their daily activities. Some of them are doing it in a robust fashion, some of them are doing it on an ad hoc basis. But what they don't tend to see is the attachment point between what industry can provide and what they're already doing internally. So we see this engagement as an opportunity for you to connect those dots, for you to show them what else they could be doing in terms of a gap analysis type arrangement, or indeed how they can improve what they're doing already. Underlying all of this, and I know Andy alluded to it before when he was talking about functional leadership in procurement, government is becoming more corporatised. There is certainly evidence of this beyond procurement when you look at the fact of the existence of a government chief information officer and a government chief financial officer. So there is a lot more centralised oversight and functions now occurring across government. And as with those other aspects of government, in the space of procurement and with risk financing and insurance in particular, as we look at it as a more singular organisation, other opportunities will open themselves up. And that's what we're trying to drive, not just from the agency perspective and understanding and helping them with some of their behaviours in terms of the way they approach risk, but helping industry help us as well. The other key document that came out with the RFP was our draft services agreement. Now, the first thing to mention here is that this agreement is consistent in style with the other all of government contracts, but it obviously has to respect the nuances associated with risk financing and insurance and dealing with the risk financing and insurance industry as well. Okay, this obviously forms part of your considerations when you're responding to the RFP, but as mentioned by Andy, if you do have questions, there is a process through which you can come back and seek clarification. but it will also be something that will be attended to after the responses in terms of negotiation processes as well. We've set up the arrangement, like I said, consistent with other all-of-government contracts, and that arrangement is a services agreement which acts as the underlying set of terms and conditions that govern the relationship between the Centre of Expertise, MB, the agency as the customer, and you as the provider. Okay? It recognises also that that can't envelop all of the nuances that will come with individual solutions that relate to particular sets of collaboration that would come the panel members' way. So sitting underneath the Master Services Agreement are service orders. And in the Master Agreement itself that we've put out as a draft, you'll see a schedule there that sets out what the service order is intended to look like. Now, it's not actually populated, of course, because it can't be until we know what a particular customer profile looks like. But it gives you an insight into the construct of that and how it fits within the Master Services Agreement. Okay? That does allow for a lot of customised provision surrounding the needs of a particular set of agencies, or indeed an individual agency. Because when we use service order and language within that document, we have two aspects to it. One is a group service order, and one is an individual service order. And that goes to show that we are recognising that some agencies might not fit in a collaborative space with other agencies for a whole bunch of reasons, but they do have the opportunity to still go through this contract model. Okay. In terms of the contract timings, we're looking at a 5+2+2 arrangement for the panel. In the context of other contracts, that is quite a long-term position to take, but we respect that the broking industry in New Zealand, or the intermediary industry in general, has been relatively static, and we want to make sure that we build these strategic relationships. We understand that solutions take time to develop, they take time to mature, it takes time to mature the customer into the solution, and we want to have that opportunity made available. The service orders themselves, now I know Andy mentioned that there is a second procurement process that attaches to this one. So right now, this is about having the capability of the industry ready to go. The second stage is about, there's a responsibility on MB and through our technical advisors that we have to look at the data that we've been receiving across government, to create solutions that then we can present that to the panel members. In terms of those solutions, we are looking at contract terms in the region of 2 to 3 years plus optional renewals of 1+1. The purpose behind that is that over time we want to see better and better collaboration across government where the opportunities arise, where it makes sense to do so. So we're not going to force a square peg into a round hole if it doesn't make sense to do so. But we are parking the capability over time to build larger customers. We've also introduced into the document service level criteria. I know they are used in some spaces of the industry already and not in others, but what it does is it gives us an opportunity to understand what's working and what's not. It gives us an understanding that allows us over time to fine-tune for the agencies a service model that we would see as consistent best practice. And it gives us an understanding and an opportunity to have meaningful discussions with the panel members on a regular basis to understand what's working and what's not. And it gives you an opportunity yourself to see, if you introduce a new aspect into your service model, to see change in the service level, to see improvement, so that you yourself can witness what's working from the customer's perspective. For the most part, and we recognise there are already some areas of collaboration in terms of insurance across government, so there is a third party in play in some parts of government, but for the most part, this is a new arrangement in terms of a contractual arrangement between the industry, between their customer, and an independent contract manager overseeing an all-of-government contract. Our role is to facilitate the solution. We are not industry. We are not there to prescribe solutions. We are there to sit with them and help them understand what is going on in an all-of-government context. But we are, first and foremost, a contract manager. Part of that role includes monitoring the performance of the solutions as they move forward, seeking feedback not just from the agencies but from industry on a regular basis as well, because we want to be as open and transparent as we possibly can. We've worked very hard prior to this briefing today to let industry know what's going on, and to give industry a perspective of agency and the nuances that they've experienced in their associations with industry. Our role also is to make sure that we are maximising the opportunities available to us. You know, we're unique in New Zealand, which is made up primarily of small to medium enterprises, that government as a holistic organisation has a different scale than most other entities in the country. It hasn't necessarily been utilising it the way they could do, and that is a big part of what we're looking to achieve with this project, is to create a different mindset with a different customer that sees the ability to maximise benefits through looking at different solutions over time that make sense at that given time. Now, there are 4 sets of criteria embedded into the RFP document. There are the preconditions, which are the basic things that you'd expect, that it turns up on time, that there are enough copies, that there is a USB copy available. There is also the mandatory criteria, most of which is certainly not unique, I would understand, in terms of the RFPs that you've already seen across the market for a number of years. It does prescribe that the respondents have a relationship, which means they, on a regular basis and readily access the insurance market for insurance solutions. And I think that that criteria is borne out by the people that we see in the room and the people that will be watching the video as well. There are a number of rateable criteria, which I'm sure that you would have had a look through now in the RFP. I don't think that there is any surprises in there. I think that you will see that there are some aspects to the questions that are more risk-based. There are some aspects to the questions that are organisational based. And there are some aspects to the questions that are asking about the way that you would interact with agencies that are not just one, but are many. But there is also a 4th aspect, and we've termed that the value-add feedback criteria. And the reason I've put the little diagram up there is because the way we are viewing our approach to the entirety of the criteria is this. We might have some respondents that, from the rateable criteria perspective, are very similar to each other in terms of the way they have scored themselves. But we are looking at a holistic overview, and we see these value-add aspects as important to our relationship with you, the industry. So your feedback is certainly valued in this space. What's worthy of mention is that, especially in the cost savings methodology and the administration fee, it's a work in progress for us as well, because we need to create something that works with the industry. Yes, we need to base it around a standard, but we need to customise it for the needs of our unique subject matter. So that's why we've gone out to the industry, because we want your insights in this space as well. The other thing to note is it's impractical in the cost savings methodology to aim for absolute accuracy. What we are after is more of a benchmarking tool more than anything else, so that we understand the relative value of an all-of-government solution versus what that agency on an individual basis would have achieved on their own right. Think of it as a benchmarking exercise.
Just on the cost savings and methodology and administration fee, would the responses here be considered commercial in confidence?
I think the responses to the cost savings methodology and admin fee are absolutely, as part of the responses, commercial in confidence. I think expect should that particular respondent get through to contract negotiations, it's something that would be picked up further there, and whether or not we as the COE would be able to leverage off that more broadly, because it was a good idea that could apply to all, would be very interested in pursuing that, but wouldn't do so without the consent of the party that suggested that idea, would be my view.
The other thing worth noting is that whilst the cost savings methodology and administration fees have been part and parcel of the previous all-of-government contracts, we have been fortunate enough to have a bit of a licence handed to us in terms of being a bit more open-minded and innovative around our approaches to this. So another reason why we have gone to industry on these subjects is because we're looking to recreate this as well, to ask ourselves, is there an improved way that we can continue to manage these aspects through a relationship with the industry and with agencies as well? Okay, and we see that as a positive challenge. We see it as also a positive feedback from our management team, and that they see this project as moving forward ahead quite nicely, and they see it as a great opportunity to test new limits and new boundaries. In terms of the concept interrogation, yes, we've put our approach up, okay? But we are open-minded on two fronts. We are open-minded with a blank page, as if the approach wasn't there, but we are very open-minded to accelerated value. So we've put a line in the sand where we've said this is probably a good place to start, understanding the nuances of government and the diversity that goes on within government. But is there a way where we can recognise and maximise value in a more accelerated fashion over time? The role of central government's been important in this process too, and it's important in terms of a component to this particular question. We've engaged heavily with central government. There's no secrets about what we're doing across government. In fact, we have openly knocked on doors and explained exactly what we're doing, because we recognised, for instance, specifically with Treasury, that they are a very important component to the decision-making process. So they're very familiar with what we're doing. They're very comfortable with the current insurance-centric approach. But obviously, if we, over time, discuss something that moves beyond something relatively traditional, Treasury will become a part of that decision-making process as well. So we are staying on very familiar terms with the officials over there and keeping them well informed about what we're doing as well. The reporting and monitoring, again, we've prescribed some ideas in that space, but industry knows what sort of information it has at its fingertips better than we do. You know what's valuable and what's not valuable. You know what will help make informed decisions in the future, and you know what might just be crowding the picture and being a bit overly burdensome. So we don't want to be burdensome, but we want to be in a position where we understand the current situation with our solutions and what the potential is for the future. And we have left that as an open forum with industry so that you can help us make our minds up about what's the good stuff to get and what's superfluous. Okay? The evaluation process is a rigorous one. Andy's already spoken about the rules of sourcing, and David's here to give us a lot of direction and oversight as well in terms of the process itself and as we move through the critical milestones. There are going to be 7 evaluators, 2 from within MB, 1 an independent source, and you're going to get 4 evaluators as representatives from across government agencies. Okay. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but in terms of the secondary procurement process, we see the agencies who are going to be involved in particular solution sets as critical in this space as well, because ultimately it's their solution and we're just facilitating it. Okay. We have set aside the period from the 8th to the 18th of December to do the physical evaluations themselves. That includes obviously marking through on a pass-fail basis the preconditions and the mandatory criteria, and looking at a more deeper level and granular level at the rateable criteria and value-add feedback. Provider presentations will only be required on as-required basis in early 2015. We're not going to make up our minds about this until we have seen the final close-off of intent to respond, which is on the 7th, this Friday. Okay? So as of next week, we will be getting our heads together, having a look at what that landscape looks like, and saying to ourselves, is it something that we can achieve on a reasonable basis? Because if we get inundated with notifications of intent to respond, it becomes a different proposition. And if we are going to do it, we want it to be meaningful for you guys as well, so that you have the right opportunity at the right time on the equation.
Greg, can you just clarify, we've got the provider presentations on as-required basis in early 2015, and then the one-on-one meetings, I think.
Yes, that's sorry.
Yeah, so if you just clarify for them so it's really clear. Thanks.
After the 7th, there is consideration to invite respondents to come in at their discretion for a one-on-one meeting with the COE. Once that call is made, we will be developing an agenda so that you understand how the meeting will pan out. But we envisage, if it occurs, it will be a period of anywhere between half an hour and an hour, providing you an opportunity to position some clarification points. But as mentioned, we are going to wait on our decision on that front until we have seen the closeout of the notification of intent to respond to the RFP. Firm negotiations won't commence until March, April next year. That recognises the fact that we've got Christmas bang smack in the middle, and the fact that on an all-of-government contract, it is exponentially more complicated than arrangements for a single agency. So we need to manage that time in a realistic fashion. We're aiming for a contract award for panel members in May 2015. The other thing that we're aiming to do is that we've got a couple of work streams on the go. One of those is obviously looking at the data that we have, managing that in terms of identifying potential solutions, and our ideal position is to have the first of those solutions available to the panel as soon as reasonably possible after contract award. Effectively, we don't want to waste your time, and we want to maximise your opportunities for the period of time that you are a panel member. Thanks, Pam. In terms of the data collection and cluster development, we wanted just to give you a bit of a sense of context about what's going on. much in tune with the consultation that we have undertaken to develop our approach. We've worked heavily with the agencies to help them understand what we're doing and why information is important. We've been very lucky in terms of the feedback that we have received from agencies, but there's also a big thanks goes out to industry. We built into our questionnaire to the agencies a letter of authority option, which is not quite the same letter of authority that you usually see in the market, but it just allowed them to ask their broker who had the information already to share it. And that was done very consistently and very efficiently, and we thank industry for helping that process along. So it's a case of be careful what you wish for, because we have been inundated with information, but all of it is valuable. And we are best positioned to make better decisions the more information that we have available to us. So we're actively now working with that data. We're in a process right now of input more than analysis, but it's not going to be very long at all before that switch changes over to the analysis stage. We are working with an independent commissioned party, INSCON Pty Limited out of Australia. They have been involved so far in the context of helping us make sure we got our RFP as tight as we possibly could get it, and making sure that we had the evaluation criteria set so that we were going to get the right responses from market. But the next stage of their involvement with us is to help us slice and dice that data, to test our assumptions, refine our thinking, to look at the opportunities that may or may not be available, and to understand the pros and cons that might be attached to each of those opportunities, and the obstacles that might be attached to those potential opportunities, so that we can manage those things in advance, fine-tune what we bring to the panel so that there is a greater likelihood of success, not just for you but for the agencies, and it also helps us in our engagement with the agencies as well. That is of critical importance to us. Right now, we've been out there talking to agencies about an approach that is quite conceptual. It becomes a different discussion when you start talking to agencies about actively participating in solutions. So we're working carefully to make sure that that engagement is right as well. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to position the agencies so that they are going to help you guys when it's time for you to start building your solutions and presenting the agencies as a collective response to the insurance market. Okay? We have been busy at not being busy about preempting what clusters will look like. We want to let the data speak for itself, but it's not just the data, it is the voices of the people in the agencies that matter as well. Okay? So data tells a black and white story. There's a lot of grey in terms of risk appetites, tolerances, current arrangements. All of those things need to be brought into the equation. But I guess what we're trying to get across here is that we are not fixed in our thinking in terms of what collaboration looks like. Okay? And depending on the type of risk that you are approaching, you know, there is potential for a broader solution across government, and depending on other risk profiles, it could be quite narrow. And our definition of what a cluster looks like is effectively anything more than one agency. Okay? So we've recently seen the likes of Corrections and Justice come together, and we would regard that as a collaborative arrangement. Okay? Key considerations. Yes, of course, risk profile. We've openly stated from the outset that we're not looking to create a one-size-fits-all, especially in an insurance-centric solution. It's just not feasible. So we are collecting information that allows us to slice and dice risk profiles. And please note that when we do come out in stage 2 of the procurement process to the panel members, we will be sharing our data in that space. Okay, so that you're positioned to really consider what could work and what couldn't, and what you can attach to the solutions to help facilitate success. Okay? But we also are mindful as well that every agency right now is in its own existing relationship, so we need to talk to agencies about what they want to do in that space and how we manage that. And that's going to be relative to the value that can be added through an all-of-government solution as well. Okay? And the key objectives, of course, yes, part of the aim is to create some economy of scale, but recognising that you still have to create something that is attractive to the market. And that's where we rely on industry, who knows the market better than we do, who has the relationships with the insurers, who has the experience of placing risk into the market on a regular basis about what's possible and what's not possible. And positioning government for longer term opportunities and managing risk. I didn't put placing insurance, I put managing risk. Okay? So, in terms of that stage 2, it is a full procurement process in its own right. However, a big part of the benefit of undertaking this first stage is that once we have the panel members set and contracted in place ready to hit the ground running, we don't need to go through the organisational credentials again. The second stage becomes purely a solution-based enterprise. So what we would be doing is we would be working actively with the agencies and developing a template so that they are gathering information that is going to be of value, that allows you to best consider the solution set available. And we will then position that information set to go out with that second stage closed RFP to the panel members. So we don't want to hide the things from you that give you the best ammunition to position your solutions, because we've seen that happen as well. We've seen some very blind RFPs go out, and we don't want to do that. And we've also stated that the opportunities, the clusters, will be presented sequentially over time. So they will come out one at a time. In terms of how often they will come out, it's too early for us to determine that. But what we are hoping to achieve is a good set of lessons learned as we go through the processes, so that we become more and more streamlined, because we want to be able to realise the opportunities as soon as reasonably possible as well. Okay, and certainly we will be looking very carefully and measuring the first set of opportunities that come out as a fine balance between the low-hanging fruit and also making sure that we have a reasonable degree of success in encompassing a broad part of government as well. I've already stated that we want to start this second process as soon as possible after the first process. We've done a lot of rigorous project planning behind the scenes. I've never been so familiar with Microsoft Project in my life. But what we are aiming to achieve is we've got 3 tangent pieces of work going on at the same time. And I'm proud to say that I think, we're pulling it off quite well. We've got this process here, this RFP process that we're seeing here today. We're already developing the secondary procurement process, and we are already working with the data that we've received. And it is our goal to have action in this space for the panel members as soon as reasonably possible after you get awarded a contract. Once those second tranches come out, those collaborative solutions come out, and there is an award to a panel member, it will trigger the effecting of a service order, which will sit underneath the services agreement. Okay, and that is the opportunity between the agencies involved in the relationship and the panel member involved in the relationship and the COE to make sure that the customised solution is recognised in the document. That's really what the service order is about. Think of it as somewhat separate and distinct from the terms and conditions. It is about the specification of what's to be delivered. Okay? And how that delivery will be measured and managed, and some governance aspects around it as well. Okay? Because we want a commercial relationship that gives industry and agency the opportunity to say what's on their mind. This is a complex technical subject matter. It's a complex all-of-government arrangement, and we will encounter things that need a good old-fashioned discussion, because if there are issues evident, we don't want to sweep them under the rug. We want to be able to be in a position where we can start talking about them and be solution setters together around a table. Stage 2 will also trigger the reporting and monitoring requirements and the application of the administration fee, because that's where the rubber hits the road. The COE will continue to have a relationship with government agencies, but like I've said from the outset, we're not positioning ourselves to be the broker. We don't have the expertise, we don't have the access to the market, we don't have the breadth of solutions that your organisations have, and we're not trying to circumvent that. But what we do want to do is we want to let the agencies know that we are here, that we want to help drive best practice, we want to help answer any questions that they might have, we want to effectively help them help you. So, like I said, we want agencies to be able to tell you all the things that go on internally with them as an organisation, not just with their active strategies and long-term intent, but the things they do internally that manage risk, the things that they do internally that will help you advertise them to the market, to position them as a point of difference that will hopefully make them a sense of or a position of competitiveness in the market. We will be participants in evaluation processes, but we will be a minority voice at the table. So if there are, for instance, 5 agencies in a given cluster, well, the voices of those agencies will be the majority voice in an evaluation process. And of course, in our role as contract managers, we will have oversight of performance via the services agreement. After the 7th of November, we will also be making a quick decision about whether we're in a position to offer those one-on-one sessions. And we don't want to waste our time nor your time, so it will be a quick decision, and we will move on that as soon as practicable if it goes ahead. Please submit your intention to respond if you haven't already by the 7th of November, close of play. Submit all questions that you might have for the clarification process by Friday the 11th. If you have well, the important one is don't be late. Once the door closes, the door truly closes. We would like to give you as much opportunity as we can. And actually, here's an opportunity to ask another question. In our second phase, where we go out to the panel members with solutions, potential collaborations of agencies, ideally, what sort of period of time as industry members would you like to have before that RFP closes? I mean, what's too short? I guess that's a good question to ask. 6 weeks?
What I'm hearing here is between sort of 4 to 8 weeks maybe feels right, but I see people nodding around the room, so anybody else got any different views or thoughts? We won't hold you to it at this point. We're just, as Greg said, we're in the the middle of building the secondary procurement process right now and planning it so that we can hit it once the sort of master agreements are executed and the panel's in place. So for us to be able to plan, that's hence the reason for the question, I guess.
Because we want to make sure, yes, as Andy said, we're building the secondary procurement process in detail now, and obviously time in the market is a key element to that. But we also, while we want to build a streamlined process, we don't want to undermine the capacity and the ability for the industry to build the right solution as well, and have security and certainty that it is the right one. Okay. So yes, it closes on the 28th of November. The reason why it was a calendar month this time is because we're not asking for solutions, we're not asking for formal commercials, we're asking for commercial framework structures, okay? But we feel that this is a more simplified RFP on the basis that we're not asking you to prescribe specific solutions for agencies. Okay, you know, and we're very fortunate in that we have a strong industry here in New Zealand, and I think it's going to be well represented. Just go back just one bit. I know agencies have expressed a lot of positive feedback, but and Andy alluded to it before, is that we are genuinely excited about the opportunities that are presented to government by this exercise, and we are genuinely excited to see the RFP responses. I think they're going to be really interesting. We also feel that this is the start of quite a journey for government in a whole number of senses, not just a solution sense, but also the opportunities to better understand government risk profile at a more aggregated level, an opportunity for central government to make some well-considered decisions about not just risk, but aspects of governing that include risk. And we are genuinely interested in working with the industry. You know, we've engaged heavily across the agencies, across industry. We've looked at what's worked and what hasn't worked so well. I think transparency is really important. I think we want to work on an arrangement where the intermediary is seen as a partner with the agencies and not just a player that sits somewhere in the middle. And we see our role as looking to engineer those sorts of relationships and helping agencies understand the capabilities of the industry as well, and helping them understand that, you know, yes, there is certainly, you can't ignore a cost aspect associated with intermediary fees, etc., but helping the agencies understand that by getting good, robust service and advice from your intermediary, the thick end of the cost wedge really comes at the insurer end, and it's worth getting that good advice at the front. Okay, so that's about it for our presentation.
The questions, are they due, the final date for questions, Friday the 14th of November or Tuesday the 11th?
Ah.
So Belle just came round. So like you good folk with a keen eye for detail, Belle has one as well as a trained lawyer, and so I was just going to stand up and clarify that. So it's the 11th, which isn't a Friday, but the 11th is the date, not the 14th. So sorry about that, it's an error at our end.
Okay, Greg, just there's a section of the RFP, rateable responses, implementation and transitions, questions 15.1 and 15.2. You're obviously gathering a lot of data. Would MB be prepared to release a sort of insurance renewal dates set of data, not by individual agency, obviously, from what you've gathered, but to give people an idea of when in the year there is numbers of agencies coming up? I mean, it just helps in terms of, I guess, responding and resourcing and transition and implementation, etc.
In terms of delivering that sort of hard data before this RFP, the answer is no. However, I think it's fair to suggest that the industry already knows that there are critical dates in the calendar where there is going to be bottlenecks of activity. But the other thing worth mentioning here is as we move into stage 2 of the process and we do seek to deliver more granular information, you'll notice that the second part of that implementation and transition question involves onboarding. Now, what we would look to do is we work with agencies who have differing perspectives on their existing contractual arrangements, but they're still interested in the solution, is that we would deliver their data at the time of the initial RFP as well, but indicating to you their position and the timing of their potential transition into the arrangement. That doesn't mean that that's the be-all and end-all and that it will actually play out that way, but we would certainly like to go into it with a high degree of certainty as well.
Yeah, and just to build on that as well, you know, as Greg mentioned in his presentation, we see this as a strategic relationship between panel members and MB, and we are very keen to understand how we can help you plan better, and I guess it's one of the benefits of being on the panel where you would have access to this type of information. So these types of questions, Martin, are very, very good, and we're receptive and open-minded as we head into stage 2 going forward.
Sorry, just following up on that, I mean, is it your intent, the data collection that you're doing and the analysis that follows from that, is it your intention to publish any part or all of that data in some form, or will that be made available to the panel members once they're appointed?
It will be made available to panel members once they're appointed, but not as a global position either. It will be made available as the solutions or collaborative opportunities are presented to the panel. But we are mindful at the same time that we don't want to make single-minded decisions from MB's perspective about how we identify those opportunities, and that's why we have commissioned external technical expertise to help position those solutions as well. Now, hopefully this is a reflection of we have tried to get the message out as much as we possibly could prior to today. But like I said, you know, as you work through the document, as you work through the draft contract as well, that you may indeed have some more questions as they arise.
Yeah, and look, we understand the challenge of asking questions in this particular forum as well. That's why we have a clarifications process, and as Greg said, looking at one-to-ones as well. I think I can stand here and say that it looks as if that it will happen, but please don't hold me to that just yet. But we think things are looking optimistic, and we're quite keen to progress that. So I don't know, Greg was a little bit more reluctant to express that, but I think it's pretty safe to say that they will happen. So hopefully, again, I see some nodding. Hopefully, you can take some comfort from that as well, in terms of more detailed questions.
Sorry. So if the broker wasn't selected as part of the stage 1, would the agency then have the ability to still engage that broker at their own decision in stage 2? So, I mean, in terms of the broker doesn't pre-qualify for stage 1, but they're still, obviously they're still out there. Is the agency still eligible to actually approach that broker who hasn't pre-qualified?
Under the solution, the all government solution, and it would be, I guess, dependent on a number of variables, but in particular where the government agency sits in terms of its expected participation or not in all of government. But we don't rely on our mandate solely. We are trying to establish a solution where government agencies feel compelled because they see the value to participate. And so I think it's unlikely but possible that what you've just described could happen outside of the panel.
Are you able to just give us a little bit more context on what information you have been and what format you have been delivering that information to the relevant entities? I've just been getting quite mixed messages from them, so maybe just a bit of feedback. Some of them are a little bit confused, a bit of ambiguity out there about what's expected from the process. So if you're just able to let us know what it is you have been telling them and how and what format.
In terms of the secondary procurement process in particular, or the this particular RFP?
This first particular RFP and the selection of the preferred panel. Okay,
so Greg hesitated, so I'll go first, and we'll see how this goes. So we've tried very hard to engage with government agencies. We've set up a client advisory group made up of around about 15 government agencies. We've been communicating very closely with them. We've given them a number of documents, including what we call our category review, which articulates the work that we're doing, the market analysis, establishes kind of the business requirements, and then articulates the strategy that we've presented to you all today and shows through in the RFP. So I guess the challenge in all of government that you have 300 odd agencies plus almost 2,500 schools. So besides having a client advisory group and socialising the concept and key documents with them, using our website and RSS feeds and other communication mechanisms that we have in government procurement branch, it is simply not possible to communicate in a really, really robust manner with every single government agency. So I'm not surprised that there is some confusion, but I think I'd like to find out a little bit more about that, because that does give me a little bit of concern. So perhaps we can take that offline. Is that theme coming through from anybody else? No? Okay. Greg, have you got anything you want to add there?
No, I mean, the messages that we've been sending have been the same messages that you've been receiving as well, in terms of, it's a two-stage process. We're not committing agencies to anything right now. We are working to get the best out of industry, ready and positioned to go and hit the ground running. And that there is going to be, I guess, a more meaningful round of engagement on a more individual basis with the agencies as we look at the data and see what stories it's telling to us, so that we can go and share those stories with the agencies, get them to test our theories, test our ideas, give us their perspective, so that we can define that opportunity better before it lands on your table as a second layer of this solution.
And obtain commitment as well through that.
That's right.
To the process.
Yeah. Yep. So our discussions with them so far have been at a conceptual level as well. And they certainly haven't been specific to say, we think that you're going to be in this. No one's near that at this stage. Yeah. But certainly that second layer of engagement is where it gets much more specific and it gets much more directed at the individual agency.
Yeah, because as Greg said, you're then taking it from conceptual to real. Yep.
Yeah. So sometimes that sort of discussion, the conceptual discussion, can lead to a bit of ambiguity. Yeah.
So you're engaging at procurement or at finance?
We're engaging at whoever has that insurance risk relationship inside any organisation. So, at the outset, admittedly, they weren't easy to find. But we've had to do a lot of digging across government, and I think for the most part we've got it right. And where we didn't know necessarily who the right person was, well, we've gone through primarily a procurement space until we've found the right person.
Yeah. And I guess when you consider the work, as I mentioned earlier, that we've been doing in banking and risk financing and insurance, it is a different stakeholder set within those government agencies, and the procurement reform program has generally tried to engage with. And of course, as Greg alluded to as well, the government agencies are set up differently. So sometimes it's procurement people, sometimes it's finance people, sometimes one person does both. And there is only one person. So depending on the size of the agency. So yep, it's an ongoing challenge.
Well, look, thank you everyone. I noticed you didn't like our biscuits very much. But no, we do appreciate you turning up. We look forward to seeing through the rest of the process. And genuinely look forward to the opportunity to have a look at the responses and move government strategy in the risk and insurance space ahead at a pace that is good for government.